While retirement is generally seen as a time of relaxation and self-focus, God calls us to love, serve, and help others for a lifetime. He has been preparing us for this retirement season, literally our entire lives. In retirement, countless Christians enter a state of spiritual dormancy, not knowing how they are called to have an impact for God's kingdom. The Retirement Reformation seeks to encourage and empower the 50 million Christians approaching or in retirement to embrace the calling God has been preparing in them. When the world says it's time to stop, you can begin to have your greatest impact. Welcome to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, where our goal is to journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him.
Reaching out to the 50 million Christ followers in America who are approaching or already in retirement, we want to help you embrace, all of us to embrace what God has been preparing you for all of your lives. You've tuned into I Retire for Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. We are your hosts, Jim and Martha Brangenberg, along with Bruce Bruinsma, the founder of the Retirement Reformation. Please check us online, retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org.
You know, I'm so excited about some of the things that are available on that website. And so I want to point your attention to the Retirement Manifesto as an option. There are a lot of resources, whether they're books, signing up for the blog, and then also on this episode, we are going to be offering to give away a copy of Retirement Reformation, the book. And you just go to the contact page on the website and you enter your information and then tell us a little bit about your Retirement Reformation story. What has God been doing in your retirement, reforming you, helping you to look at it differently? Share that with us and we'll get a winner.
retirementreformation.org. Go down to the bottom of the page. Click on Contact Us. We would love to hear from you and to hear your story. You know, we want to help all of us to see what God has in store, but specifically we want to help you see what God has in store for you. Your retirement years can be your best ministry season of life as you take advantage of a lifetime's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with your newfound freedom of time and money, and you get to invest all of this into the upcoming generations. What an awesome privilege that is. It's not retirement as usual, however. This is the Retirement Reformation. When you start charting your course for these 30 plus years ahead of you, it can be a bit daunting. So Bruce Bruinsma joins us today to share some insights from his latest book, Charting Your Course, Planning Your Next 3 Decades. Bruce, welcome back to I Retire for Him.
Jim and Martha, it's always good to be with you, and this topic is obviously close to my heart. Yeah. And looking forward to our conversation today.
So, Bruce, what is the funniest thing you've seen new retirees do?
Well, it's strange. You know, what's the old saying? Like a chicken with her head cut off, running around. It's finding newfound freedom and not sure exactly where to go and what to do. So it's a frenetic pace of trying to find what leisure activity it is that's going to fulfill me. And so when you sit back and have an opportunity to look at that or to have a conversation, a serious conversation with couples that are in that matter, it's they don't know which way to turn or which way to go, but they know it's going to be good and they're excited about it, but they don't really know what to do. I'm not sure if that's funny or sad, but it is true.
Well, it's often you find people that are newly retired and you're like, you're so busy now. They often say, I'm so busy now, I can't imagine that I ever had time to work.
That is a very common experience. It's activities emerge to fill the time. The question then is, are those activities the ones that will really bring meaning and purpose to you, or in fact, if they're just fun, that's fine for a period, but not for 30 years.
Right.
So let's talk about this. You mentioned that for retirees and pre-retirees, they talk a lot about what they want to no longer do, what they want to stop doing, instead of talking about what they're going to start doing. Give us an example of that.
Well, I think you have different categories. You have people that have been in jobs, for example, that they have really not enjoyed. It wasn't part of their ministry. They were not working for him during their working years. And so they just can't wait to get out of where it is, and their desire to get away from what they've been doing is so strong that they can't think about where it is that they're going. So that's one kind of example. Another example is that the work they've been doing is fine. They're not passionate about it. It's okay. They get paid, and that's good. But again, they are almost, it seems like they are almost stuck in no man's land, and they are still looking backwards about what it is they're leaving, not what it is they're going towards. And then there's a third category of person who, says, well, I'm never going to retire. And the pastor that says, I'm going to die in the pulpit. Says, well, I'm never going to retire. And you know that retire isn't in the Bible, and so I'm never going to retire. But then real life comes along. And whatever the way that they were earning a living either diminishes or goes away. Health issues come up, and just the things of life happen. And they are, and every time that is the case, there's always this element of surprise. I wonder how this all happened. And yet when we look around in church or just in our community or all the articles you can read, you see that life does happen. But we don't have that perspective of it being a 30-year life happens. And so everything seems to be a surprise, and we're doing it for the first time rather than learning how to experience it and really being able to embrace it.
And that's why your latest book, Charting Your Course, is really so important, because you're trying to get people to really think about, let's plan these next 3 decades, not just let them happen. Because one of the stories I've heard so many times is that people are like, well, the fear thing we mentioned in a previous podcast, I'm so fearful I'm not going to have enough money, and so we didn't do anything. And by the time we realize we're going to have plenty of money, now we can't do anything because we don't feel good enough, or we don't feel up to traveling. And so we've got to help. Let's help people along. Well, so, a lot of people, Bruce, this is what I love. They go around thinking that retirement's they're going to be singing Margaritaville song all day long. They're sitting at a resort pool, sipping Mai Tais at lunch and just having a great time. But that's not, I mean, how long does that last?
Well, it can't last for a lifetime, that's for sure, either financially or practically. And so, just stepping back a moment, and Martha, you often ask questions about, does this apply to people that are more than pre-retirement, so they're in pre-retirement? And let me just give you a perspective on that impacts retirement. And that perspective is this: don't wait to do all the things that you hope to do until you retire. Build them in to your life, starting at 30 and 40 and 50 and 60. The sad questions of people that, they wanted to travel, so they've got all these travel plans. They hit the point of transition from work to not work, and then something happens in their life and they can never experience it. There is no reason not to build those things into our lives as we go along, so that when we get to those years, it's not a whole new experience, but it's a continued experience.
When we come back, lots more with Bruce Bruinsma from the Retirement Reformation. But in the meantime, we're going to ask him this question when we come back. What's the problem with retirement communities? We're going to hear what Bruce has to say about that. We'll be right back. Hang on.
Membership has its privileges. And with the Retirement Reformation, it's true. We have 3 levels of membership to access our growing wealth of resources. We also provide discipleship and training to bring the Retirement Reformation alive in your life. So join us. Go to retirementreformation.org and click on the Membership tab. Choose the level of membership that will help you rethink, retool, reframe, and reform your retirement today. The basic level is free, so you can get started today. Take the journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. retirementreformation.org. Let's get back to more I Retire for Him.
Hey, welcome back to I Retire for Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation. So glad that you've tuned in to be with us this afternoon on our podcast. We've got Bruce Bruinsma here, the founder of the Retirement Reformation. Bruce, I'm going to hand it over to you. You've got a special guest for us today.
Oh, I do. And Karen, we're so pleased to have you here on the program. Karen LONGSTREET, and I use that pronunciation because her family and her husband's family and my family and my wife's family all come from the same geographic area in the Netherlands. And so you're listening to a couple of Dutchmen today, so you got to take that into account. And because we all know, at least my grandfather told me, that if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. And,
right.
and so I know, Karen, that you agree with that. So
yes, definitely.
So listen, I tell you what, would you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll delve into how God is using you today.
Absolutely. And Bruce, I must tell you, you're the only person who pronounces my name correctly. That's great. Well, ministry has held a primary place in my heart since I was a young mom. And I've just always been so grateful that the Lord knew the desire of my heart to reach people of the gospel. Over my lifetime, he has opened so many doors of opportunity to make him known through my private music studio business and leading music on many levels in church, and then serving on international ministry boards for a total of over 30 years. But my greatest commitment has been as representative for Stonecroft across the state of Iowa, where for over 40 years, I have built and supported leadership for outreach groups in small rural towns and large cities. And I also train speakers for our outreach meetings. For your listeners who might not be familiar with Stonecroft, their mission is to inspire women to share the gospel with those around them. We equip them to reach each woman where she is, as she is.
Well, Karen, that's a special gift that God has given to you and that you've responded to. And I know when you and I spoke before, you shared with such passion your desire to raise up the next generation of leaders for Stonecroft. And that, I think, within the context of the fact that during the 30 years of retirement, there are these different stages. And as we approach these different stages, we realize issues that we need to address, and we need to perhaps pass on wisdom and knowledge and experience to the generations that's behind us to be able to continue on. Tell us more about your passion for mentoring and raising up leaders.
Well, you are so correct. When I turned 70 several years ago, I must say, I knew it was time to begin mentoring younger women to replace me, knowing that to do that well would take a number of years. So with my music studio, I identified a gifted student who earned her music degrees, and then we spent many months working together as the students smoothly transitioned to their new teacher. And at the same time, my husband moved into retirement, and he used the same mentoring strategy in his investment business in order to guarantee the well-being of his clients. So as I came to understand the great value in a strong mentoring program, now I'm training a middle-aged woman to be the Stonecroft State Representative for Iowa. And we're actually in a 2-year program of leadership training and designating responsibilities for her in preparation for her to replace me. At this point, we just refer to her as my associate, but she will ultimately take my position. But I'm being very intentional about challenging our aging leaders to do the same and helping position them to still be involved in the ministry, but to raise up the next generation in order to bring their energy and gifts, their wonderful, fresh new ideas and vision to those key leadership positions.
Well, I just love the way that you've described that and the action plan that you've implemented, and you've found a formula, a way to think that is different than so many, and that your husband has used, you used in your music studio, and now you're using in this area. We know that in the 3 stages of retirement, one of them we call active, the next one we call mentoring, and the last one we call reflective. And you are just such a wonderful example of that mentoring picture and the idea of being intentional, but also being able to do it with patience, and not expecting everything to happen automatically. How has that
Yes.
how has that played itself out for you as you've learned to be patient in the process?
Oh, it's so rewarding because with patience comes thoroughness. And I see that the equipping, as you said, takes time, but then they are prepared to assume the position and be successful and to feel as they're launched. They are being launched all along. It's not suddenly like you say, here's your position and just turning it over to them. But we know that God will use it powerfully because they will have the favor of the women that they're working with me all along. And so there's so much value in it.
Well, I just really appreciate that message. I think that's a critical retirement reformation message that that applies in so many areas. One last question for you here is I know that you're a woman of prayer, and so what role does prayer play in these activities? And as you have grown and learned how to do this mentoring over the last number of years, what role has prayer played in that for you?
Well, as I am navigating this changing season of my life as a senior, I'm excited to see how God has really put a burden on my heart to open up opportunities for women to come together to pray, because that is the great work. And at this point in my life, God has really challenged me to start prayer groups. One of them is a group that I started 4 years ago exactly, because in 2016 I identified a group of women who love to pray, but they had been so deeply concerned about the direction of our country and the upcoming election, and they were constantly asking me, Karen, what can we do? What can we do? And I said, you know what? The most important thing we can do is pray. And we started a prayer group called Pray for America that prays together weekly to this day. And it's so surprising to us to witness the urgency of the prayer needs now compared to when we started back then, because they just seem to escalate with each new week. And then I also started a prayer group to impact our town, and it's called Indianola Prays, the name of my town. And we pray for every aspect of community life. And the exciting thing to us is both of these prayer groups, as we unleash the power of God to bring his resources to this earth, we are seeing incredible answers to prayer in families, in our community, and in our country. And I have to say, honestly, it's the most exciting work that I'm involved in, is praying with women.
I was going to ask you, Karen, what word of encouragement can you bring? And I think you just did it.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for your ministry, and thank you for your willingness to share with us. And our prayers are in support of yours.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
All right, and thank you, Karen. And we want to invite all of you to check out all of our resources out there on our website, retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org. Not only can you get access to this show and many of the podcasts we've done, but book resources, Bible studies, our weekly blog, and the Retirement Manifesto. We'll be right back with more on iRetire4Him.
The Retirement Reformation website, online at retirementreformation.org, has a growing number of resources designed to help you in what may be the most productive part of your life journey. Let the door open into your last third of life with meaning and purpose, which leads to freedom and joy. Set the loneliness aside and experience the encouragement and support you need through online courses, support groups, books, prayer guides, life direction studies, and webinars, all designed to help find the new direction already planned for you. God does have a plan. Let us help you discover what it is. Make the journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org and check out our resources tab. Now back to more I Retire for Him.
Hey, welcome back to I Retire for Him, the mouthpiece for the Retirement Reformation. And yes, I promised you that we're going to ask Bruce this question. Hey, what's the problem with retirement communities? But first, we got to just, Bruce, we just had an amazing conversation with a guest that you invited on. And I love it when you bring on guests to share their stories. So we got to keep doing that. More shows. We got to do more invitations to people to share their retirement stories, because there's a lot of people out there doing some really cool stuff in retirement.
There is a lot of people doing a lot of cool stuff. It's when we talk about the issues, you tend to paint the whole group with the same brush, and that's not fair and that's not right, because it's not true. There are a lot of people that are doing wonderful and meaningful things, and as we do these podcasts together, we're going to meet lots of them.
Yes.
And that's going to be an encouragement. The issue is there are so many that are not. And so we need to take those who are, be an encouragement to those who are not, help those who are not to work along the pathways that will take them to that meaning and purpose and the joy and freedom that we know is available.
I love that. And you make it sound so reachable, so doable. And I think that's one of the things we want our listeners to hear, that don't be down on yourself. If this is something, a new idea to you, take it where you're at. And I want to remind our listeners that we're talking about your book, Charting Your Course, and you can find that on retirementreformation.org. Okay, so retirement communities. What's the problem with them?
Yeah, Bruce, what's the problem with retirement communities?
There are lots of issues, and the bigger question is, what are we going to do about housing at a given stage in our life?
Okay.
And so there's the pre-retirement, where husbands and wives are having conversations about they'd like to be someplace that they know that what's ahead and that they can be taken care of in various stages. That's one kind of an area. You've got the 55 and plus communities, the Sun City Wests and the Sun Cities of the world, and say, well, do I want to go into a community where it is very homogeneous and very consistent in terms of what I can expect, whether I'm going to the grocery store or to church or bowling on the green. And then you have the issues that come a little bit later. And we wouldn't call them communities necessarily, but the health facilities. I know in the case, both of your parents are well into their 80s and are still doing fine, but the physical things are starting to be a bigger challenge. So what does that next stage look like? And these are all important issues. And because there are 5 generations alive at one time, sometimes we have issues with our parents because we have the responsibility. How are we going to advise them, or how are we going to deal with them? I know in my case, when my mother was 86, and finally was the point where she really couldn't live alone, and we had to make the very difficult decision to make a transition to a beautiful spot where she was well cared for, but man, she resented every day that she spent there. And so these are the dynamic tensions that are very, very real.
But there's another dynamic to senior communities, to 55 plus communities that you didn't talk about, and that's the fact that when you're hanging out with a bunch of people that are in your same stage of life, there's nobody to benefit from all the wisdom that you have. When we hang out with all kinds of chronologically superior people, the upcoming generations don't get the opportunity to get influenced and impacted by who we are.
Matter of fact, one of the biggest challenges, and we probably ought to do a separate podcast just on this issue that I'm going to bring right now, is how in fact does the information get changed? We know, because of what it says in Proverbs and what we experience, that it should happen. The translation of experience and wisdom from one generation to another. Except in our world, including in our churches, everything is so segmented by age that the opportunity for that interaction is really hard to take place. And then when you add the fact that the older generation is being seen as irrelevant, so why would you want to get any information from an irrelevant group of people? So man, it is complex, but it is critical that we find answers to that are meaningful and boots on the ground. I will say that during this COVID-19, I have seen some wonderful examples of families coming together virtually who never would have come together in that way with that degree of intentionality if it were not for having to have the family together in a Zoom meeting and being able to interact with the younger generation in ways that you probably wouldn't if you're having a barbecue in the backyard.
Some good thoughts. And I know I love the point that you said we need to just find some ways, because to do the transfer of wisdom and to be able to share life experiences, there are a lot of young people that maybe don't have a lineage that affords that to them. So thinking outside of the box and saying, okay, who can I befriend? Who can I build a relationship with that I can transfer my knowledge and my wisdom and my love to? And so that's a great conversation.
Yeah, and let me just give you one quick example.
Please.
That I know we did a survey in our church, and we found out that there were 20 single moms. Of those single moms, there were 4 of them that had family and a support network in town. The balance did not. And so they need help.
Yes.
They need grandparents. They need someone to come alongside them as a family. So there's a very practical, hands-on thing that we can do, and it is and with all the divorce rate amongst the church, there is an increasing number, an amount of need in that area. So that's a very boots on the ground kind of a experience.
But if there's one thing that our culture needs in the United States of America is that intergenerational contact. So has your church made it work? I mean, do they've got the generations mixing together to help meet each other's needs?
The honest answer is no. In the process of having the conversation, and that is part of the conversation of the Retirement Reformation and the church. As a matter of fact, my next book is going to be on the Retirement Reformation and the church, because there are so many both needs and opportunities for the intergenerational activity and lots of other good things that can happen as a result of the message of the Retirement Reformation, both to the church, its leadership, and to those that fit into that age category.
And I just want to say something that you have said to us is that this really isn't about selling a book or selling a program or, even joining, but it's about a movement. It's about changing the mind. And you have a scripture verse that actually goes along with that really helps with that. And we'll just, Romans 12:2, you'll have to look it up because we don't have time to quote it right now.
Stop copying the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Bruce Bruinsma with the Retirement Reformation, another great show, fast moving, ridiculously fast, but we look forward to bringing you back again. Thanks, Bruce.
Good to be here, as always.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. You've been listening to iRetire4Him, the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation, with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation's only Bruce Bruinsma. We're Christ followers pursuing purpose in our retirement. So ultimately, I retire for him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.